off for the New Year's. Joe, how you doing today?
Hey man, I'm doing fantastic. This year's off to a good start. Good news, good things. It's good to be back after a week off, but it's also kind of like something was missing last week. I'm not gonna lie, especially after such a great Christmas Eve episode that we did. With Vicky coming in, and even though it's a 30-minute episode, it went on for like an hour, I think. But that's what happens when you get me and her in a room. We tell stories, and we start vibing, and conversations lead to more conversations. But it was good, and I'm just glad to be back with you here today.
Yeah, it's actually been 2 weeks since I've been on here, so it's nice to be back.
So what you all may not know is the reason that Roy was not available is because he was on the road. He came down to Florida with his family to visit, to vacation, but to visit with me. I'm going to be a little bit proud there and be like, yeah, he came to visit me. But we got some great work done. We're always, there's, especially in this age of telecommunication and work from home and remote workforce, and maybe it's because I'm like an old head or something, but the collaboration we get when we're in a room together, the energy, the way that things get done is so different. And those few days together was, I would say, is as productive as a month's worth of virtual working.
Yeah. I know it's not in line necessarily with our word of the week today, but maybe it is. I don't know. But what's interesting is that you and I have had a lot of conversations about some of the flaws with remote work and video chats. Things like a pause. There's space there. And somebody might think, oh, okay, I'm going to move on. But in actuality, that pause was a pause of serious reflection, serious thinking. And sometimes it's hard to pick up on some of those things when you're remote. And we had probably like 20 different examples of that when we were face to face in the room, where one of us paused and we looked over and were like, you know what, it's time to get some French fries, or get some Red Bull, right, or something, or maybe we need to dive deeper into this topic and go down that rabbit hole a little bit, because there's something important going on here that we're contemplating, we're thinking about, and it's really hard to pick up on that remotely. And so I think you're right. Being face to face, for a week, we got way more done. I was talking with our account person Lori yesterday, and we were talking about how nice it has been to work from home because there aren't as many distractions, and you just lock down and you get that work done that you need to get done. But we miss out on a lot of the social interaction we're missing out on. So it's lonely sometimes at home, but we're also missing out on some of that collaborative thinking and collaborative work where you have an idea that prompts me to have an idea, and that exchange that goes back and forth that naturally happens in a workplace when you're side by side talking with somebody, that doesn't happen when you're stuck at home.
That synergistic communication.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, I think that right there, that one of our viewers commented a couple weeks ago and gave us a word, and actually synergy was one of their words. So hey, why don't we go down that rabbit hole? Let's talk about synergy today.
I love it. It's one of my favorite words, not just because it comes from one of my favorite books, but Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's habit number 5 or 6 is synergy. And I will take his definition of synergy and I'm going to steal it, because when you find good doctrine that works for you, you got to stick with it, right? Yeah. And that works for me. That the 7 Habits, it literally changed my life. It gave me a new perspective. I think what it did is it took a lot of things, like I was able to relate to a lot of what was in the book. There were thoughts or ideas I'd had that when Stephen Covey articulated them and put them in proper context, they meant so much more to me. And that's essentially his definition of synergy, is when the sums of, or always says, when 2 parts equal something greater than the sum. For example, 1 + 1 now equals 3 because you have synergy. And that's what the book did for me. It was like my ideas plus his ideas became something greater than either one of the ideas on their own. And that's how synergy works for me. he goes on to talk about the 3 different styles of communication or levels of communication, where the first is defensive, where like we have defensive communication. It's very legalistic language. It's talking about, the contract is, and I do this and you do that. And it's very, very defensive. We're protecting ourselves in our communication because we gotta protect ourselves because we feel like the other person's against us. Or if I open up, they're going to pull one over on me or work me over. And then the next level of communication is respectful communication. That's where we start to work together a little bit. Like we're respecting one another, we're listening to one another, but we're, 1 + 1 = 1.5, not 2 even, because I'm compromising a little bit, you're compromising a little bit, just so we can work together. But then the third level of communication, which he says most people don't really achieve, is synergistic communication. And that's where we're fully transparent, fully open, where it really is a win-win relationship because I'm being fully transparent. You're being respectful of that, but you're not forfeiting your position or your rights because you can trust me. Right. And then we work together to find out how can you win and I win in this situation. And that's where synergistic communication comes in. And that's like the highest level of communication. So Synergy's it's a favorite of mine because of all of that. And I think that for me personally, it helps me open up. Like Roy, you and I have a synergistic relationship. We have synergistic communication. If I sense, like you were saying, like if I sense that, hey, this is maybe what I said was a little too forward or too harsh or insensitive, I want to stop and I want to go there with you and say, I'm sorry, did I hurt? What's up? But you trust me enough to be honest with me, because you know that I respect you. And that is an epic level of trust. That's an epic level of trust. So, but that's why I love Synergy. It's a good one.
Yeah. I think, no, I can't remember the name of the book. So my brain is failing me this morning, but it might've been EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey, or it might've been like Jim Collins' Good to Great. One of those good ones. They were talking about synergy and they used the illustration of draft horses. And I'm probably going to butcher these numbers. So if anybody's watching and you've read this book and you know that I'm wrong, feel free to comment and let me know the right numbers. But basically it goes like this. 1 draft horse is capable of pulling 4,000 pounds on its own. It can pull 4,000. 2 draft horses that have never been paired together before are capable of pulling 10,000 pounds. However, 2 draft horses that have been trained together and understand each other and work well together can actually pull 16,000 pounds between the 2 of them. And so it's crazy because you think about, well, a person is only capable of as much as a person is capable of. And we find that that's not true. And this is a great illustration that I love your point about 1.5. When you get to the second tier and you start to compromise, and I visualize this in my head. I see these 2 horses kind of going back and forth, like one pulls, the other pulls. And there's a little bit of time when maybe they're pulling together, or every now and again they get in sync a little bit. But even that, they only get to that 10,000 pounds, which is still more than the 2 of them could pull individually. If you had a 4,000 pound sled over here and a 4,000 pound sled over here, right? And they're both pulling 8,000. No. They can pull 10,000 pounds. But man, when they work together, they pull simultaneously. They both are in sync. They're both operating on the same wavelength. They both trust each other. They're both, moving in the exact same direction. Now they're at 16,000 pounds, 4 times the amount of 1 horse. That right there is crazy. That right there is what I think of with synergy.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great I think I remember either hearing the story or reading that story somewhere before. It doesn't matter what the real numbers are, but the point is, is well taken. That I think that's so hard though, right? It's so hard for us we think that we're being synergistic when we're really just being accommodating. And, that's why the book is not, the 7 habits of accommodating people. It's, or compromising people. It's 7 habits of highly effective people. And the overall thing that we're going for is a win-win, not a win-lose, not a win compromise, because a win compromise is a lose, right? Mm-hmm. We always have to remember that we're striving for a win-win. And if I'm asking you to compromise, I'm not being synergistic. If I'm asking you to give a little, I'm not being synergistic. I'm trying to dominate the situation. I'm trying to win at your expense. But in a synergistic situation, like you say, when those horses realize that they're not working against each other, one's not trying to pull the sled to the east and the other one's trying to pull to the west. Once they recognize that, they're both trying to pull the sled in the same direction. Now, imagine one horse looks at the other and says, pull your weight. I'm pulling mine, you pull yours. Now we're being in a defensive, kind of a compromising. Fine, you do your job, I'll do mine. You do your part, I'll do mine. That's not my job. My job is this side. Your job is that side. That is not synergy. That's compromise. That's I'm looking out for me. We're working together, right? We're pulling the sled in the same direction, ultimately trying to achieve the same goal. But are we working together? Are we synergistic? But when they look at each other and say, hey, I trust you're doing everything you can to pull as much weight as possible. And the other horse looks at the other and says, yeah, me too. Let's get this. And they both start working together to get the sled across the line, or both sleds across the line. Now that's true synergy. And that goes to one of our core values at JMC Brands. That's where the whole idea of 100% plus 100% equals 100%, right? And even though it should equal 300% in this example, but the whole idea though behind that core value is that, some days if I show up and say, hey, Roy, you're 50% owner, I'm a 50% owner in the business, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to bring my 50%, and I expect you to bring your 50% too. Well, if I'm giving 50%, you're giving 50%, and that equals 100, some days I'm going to be sick. Some days I'm going to be discouraged. Some days I'm not going to feel like giving my half. And so on our best day, we're getting 100% done. But on a day where I'm a little bit in the slums and not giving my full potential, you've got to carry that weight. And let's say you're doing your 50% and I'm doing 30. Now we're not even at 100% today. But this, in a true synergistic relationship, a true synergistic partnership, if I say I'm going to bring 100%, you bring 100%, even if we both have a bad day and we're only at 60% each, we're still 120%. We're still better than a day when you and I bring each of our halves. And that's synergy. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost kind of like the chain analogy, where it's more like the weakest link rather than a sum of each of the parts, in that scenario. If you're only bringing 30%, even if I'm bringing 150%, we're still bogged down by a 30%, right? And if we did that on a regular basis, we would be stuck. Two of the words that you and I have talked about a lot in the past that I think have a lot to do with what we're talking about today is contrarian versus compromise. And so we've talked about this over the past, where there are certain people that are contrarians, and correct me if I'm using this word wrong here, but they argue for the sake of arguing. They come up with ideas that are different just to be different. And then there's the compromisers. Whatever you want to do, let's just do it. We're just going to do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter what I think, and I'm just going to do what you want to do. And I think that these two areas, I think that it's important to allow room for a contrarian and a compromise. However, if that's the norm, you're in a lot of trouble, because then you have somebody that's pulling in the opposite direction because, well, have we tested the opposite direction? Do we know if the opposite direction could work? Everybody is rowing in one direction except for one person. Now you have a huge drag on the organization. I think that during open brainstorming, creative sessions, I think contrarians are great because they're going to get you to think outside the box. They're going to get you thinking in a different direction, and they might uncover some ideas that you've never thought of before. And so there is a synergistic aspect to contrarianism. I don't think that's a word. Contrarianism? Maybe it is. Whatever.
I mean, we'll roll with it.
We'll roll with it.
Every week we'll make one up.
That's right. Yeah. On the flip side, that compromiser. Look, you're smarter than I am. You're more dedicated than I am. You know more about this than I do. So I'm just going to go with whatever you say is best. All right. Well, that is another huge problem because now, whatever you want to do, we'll do it. And so you're going to pull, and then I'm going to pull because I'm following you. You don't have a partner. You have a follower, and you have a dogmatic follower, which is, sometimes it's okay, but for the most part, we don't really want dogmatic followers who are just. All right, whatever you say, yes, you're, a yes man, right? We don't necessarily want that all the time. There are times though, and I've used this example before, like when I was a firefighter and we were on the fire scene, if the chief says, go vent the roof, unless there is a serious danger that you know about that they don't, you go vent that roof, period. Now is not the time to argue. Are you sure that you want me to vent that roof? Are you sure that, right? The contrarian aspect right now is the absolute wrong place to be. Right now, we need somebody that will compromise. You know what? I really would prefer to be on the nozzle inside the building with the hose, putting out the fire. But if you want me to go vent that roof, I'm going to go vent that roof. Afterwards, at the after action review, that's the time when you come back and say, why did you have me vent the roof when I could have? And then there's time for conversation. Now there's time for relationship building and trusting your leader in these things. But on the fire scene is not the time to argue it. Yeah. All right. I want to be on the tip, but I'm not. I'm going to go vent the roof. That's the most important thing that I can do right now because that's protecting the people inside. I'm going to go do it. And so, when we're talking about synergy, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this because I can see your wheels turning. I think we have to allow a time and a place for contrarianism and for compromise, but that's not a daily basis thing. That's not partnership. That's not synergy. What do you think?
Well, I think that you packed a whole lot into that, man. Okay, so let's go back to synergy for just a second. I think that if the team, all team members are being synergistic, are operating in the interest of synergy, then they know when the chief says go vent the roof that it's with good cause. And they're not compromising in that situation. They are working for the greater good of the team because they trust the leadership because it's a synergistic team and they're all working together. And so I don't know that that's in my mind. I'm not looking at that as someone's compromising. I'm looking at that as a good team functioning properly together. Now, when we start talking about individuals, their temperaments and their attitudes and who they are and what makes them them. I think every team needs, you can't have a team full of contrarians. You can't have a team full of followers, and you can't, so one team full of the same type of people won't work because you need people who want to take direction and go do great work in their discipline, even if they're not independent, or even if they're not natural leaders, even if they're not visionaries, if they're not contrarians or whatever. But I do think that there's a difference between, and this is just, I've done research about this, but I'm not well researched in this. But there's a difference between a contrarian and an independent thinker. And so there's conflicting definitions and there's conflicting thoughts on it. But what I've settled on for now is that a contrarian is going to be someone who, like you said, they want to bring up an opposing thought for the sake of disrupting the team, for the sake of, I've got a different point of view and here is my idea, and drawing attention that brings everyone off track because then it takes the focus off of the cause and onto them. And so the contrarian kind of does that, versus an independent thinker who says, I've got a different idea. Can we look at this together and see if this is going to be a good idea? It shakes things up. It's a little bit different. It's not definite. It's definitely not in line with what we're doing now. But if we're looking for a new way and looking for a different idea, something outside of the box, here's an idea. Let's work together towards considering this idea as an option. And that's an independent thinker versus somebody who's just wanting to assert a contrary idea to disrupt the team.
Yep, absolutely. And I think even in what you're saying, I think that when we make room for these kind of a thing, you know, we make room for independent thinking, we make room for contrarianism to a certain extent, you know, in a creative thinking, in a brainstorming process. You know, when those things never exist, you know, you end up with people who are frustrated because they feel like they're never heard. They feel like you don't care about their point of view or whatever. But when you make room for them to think independently or even think outside the box, completely outside the box, then you get some really good ideas that you can then develop and think through and find out if those are really going to work. But in the grand, I like these. Go ahead.
I know you were going to say something. I apologize. Go ahead.
That's all good. Well, but in the grand scheme of synergy, I like what you were saying about the synergistic team, you know, with the example of vending the roof, right? Yes, a synergistic team is going to work, you know, firing 100% plus 100%, right? The interior team is going to be 100%. The ventilation team is going to be 100%. Water supply is going to be 100%, right? You know, I've seen a lot of instances where there are rogue firefighters going around busting open windows because they want to bust open a window and they think they know what's best. You know, and in those kind of situations, it ends up causing extra property damage. It causes risk for the interior team. It causes risk for the people who are going rogue, you know, and those kind of situations creates the opposite of synergy. It actually creates danger in a work environment. And so, you know, I do agree to your point. When you are a synergistic team, it isn't compromised to do a job that you don't necessarily want to do. I was even thinking about like football, and I'm going to mess this up, but like Terrell Pryor, who as a quarterback for Ohio State was a phenomenal quarterback. He had a lot of issues. You know, I'm not going to talk about that. But when he played for the Browns, he wasn't playing as a quarterback. You know, he was playing as a receiver, and he was doing a great job at it. You know, at some point in his life, he had to say, I'm willing to not be a quarterback so that I can play football at a professional level. And he did successfully. Now, I mean, you know, maybe he's not the best example, but, you know, he switched from, you know, he compromised at one point, but then became synergistic.
Well, I mean, if it's all towards the end goal, or, you know, in the fire example, I mean, you're there to eliminate a threat and save lives, period. And that's protecting the lives of the people who are in the building. And if that means I vent the roof so the people inside are protected, and so that they can do their job and eliminate the threat. I mean, we all should be working together towards a common goal, a common purpose. And then if you are synergistic, and this is another habit in the 7 habits, is, you know, seeking first to understand and then to be understood. So you may want to break the windows, but you were told, hey, don't break windows. Going back and saying, hey, can you help me understand why we wouldn't break windows in this situation? Like you said, time and place. There's a time and place to ask those questions and a way to do it. There's a time and place to assert an out-of-the-box idea and a particular way to do it. And synergistic team members will respect one another and ask those questions in a way that's going to contribute to the greater good. And if breaking that window is going to cause a backdraft that's going to set the place ablaze even higher, and it's going to, you know, risk other lives, then that's not working in the interest of the common goal. And so I think it is important that everyone tries to understand why we do things, you know, the way that they're done. And if you get that information and you still think that your idea is valid, you can still express it, even if you're like, hey, what about this? but it's still, that has to be in the interest of, and I think good leaders will train people, the contrarians, who don't know any different, the difference between contrarianism and independent thinking. But I think a good leader will say, hey, you've got some really cool, off the wall, out of the box, great ideas. Let's bring those in, and let me give you the tools so that you know when and where to express those ideas and how to vet those ideas against the goal,
Right.
like the greater good that we're working towards, so that you know when you bring that idea to the table that it's going to be contributing to, not distracting from, the greater good.
Yeah.
The goal, the ultimate team goal. And if you can't figure out a way to do that, cool, bring them to me and I'll help you sort through those. And we'll do practical exercises to know the difference. But here's the difference. If you are on a defensive level of communication because you're not synergistic, remember, defensive, and then there's respectful, and then there's synergistic. So if you're on a defensive level of communication, you bring the idea to me and I'm like, hey, that really doesn't work towards the greater good. Here's why. And we have a great conversation. But you're saying, none of my ideas count. You guys always dismiss me. Are you being synergistic at all? Or are you being defensive because your ideas aren't taken into consideration? And I've seen this, I've experienced this, where team members will come, they'll give an idea, and then I'll chew on it for a while. I'll be like, I don't know if that's the right answer. But I go and do the research, and I come back months, maybe even a year later, and say, remember that idea you brought? Now's the time. Now is the time, because maybe the goals have changed, or maybe the resources have changed, or maybe that idea has evolved, or maybe the research, but whatever reason, now is the time for your idea. And that's a tough one. So it takes a high level of maturity for that person, whoever it is with those ideas, to get on that synergistic level of knowing that and trusting the leadership, trusting the team to say, I know we're working for the greater good. And although my idea, if you like, and I'll say this to anybody watching, if you really feel like you believe in your soul that your leadership is against you, first check yourself and check the situation. But if that situation is toxic, go ahead, move on to something else. Like, you don't deserve to work in a toxic environment. And because sometimes it's not even malicious. It's just, personalities sometimes don't work together. I know that. I have a very strong personality. Anybody who's worked with me knows that I have a strong personality. But anybody who knows me well knows that I love you. And it's because I have that high level of trust that I'm going to trust that I can share with intensity, the thoughts, my feedback. No, that's not a great idea. I don't think it's going to work. And it's not because I don't like you. It's not about me and you. Me and you are good. It's that idea doesn't fit the goal, or it doesn't fit the plan right now. And so you got to dig deep. You got to find a team that you can be transparent with, that you can be trusting with, that you can share your ideas and know that they're heard. And if not, you can try to affect positive change in those situations. And if that doesn't work, you got to find a place where you can express yourself productively, respectfully, and get to that level of synergistic relationship.
Yeah, I love what you said. Trust comes first. If you don't trust your team, you'll never be synergistic. You can't. And so if you trust your team, then it's time to bring out another JMC Brands core value, which is selfless service. Team above self. Work towards the greater good of the organization, because if the organization is successful, you will be successful. But if you don't trust, you can't get to that level. But the team before self concept, it really requires a mature attitude to say, I don't care if I'm getting what I want, because the team is getting what they need. And because they're getting what they need, I'm getting what I want. It's
right. That's the Zig Ziglar quote. You can have everything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want. It's that service first mentality. My interest is not Joe's interest. My interest is the team's interest, the win concept that we all get across the finish line. When that becomes my want, that's all I want, then I don't want Joe to win. I want the team to win. And what is Joe's role in that game?
Mm-hmm.
I had to cut you off because you struck a nerve, and I love it.
That's what I'm here for. I'm a musician. I strike chords, you know. You know, I think we had some great conversation today about synergy. A couple good comments in there, like, you know, Vicky's on fat fist a couple of ducks when we were talking.
One fat fist. That was a typo. That's one fat fist a couple of ducks. That was a memory game that my dad used to play on road trips.
Okay. You want to tell me?
It made sense when she made the comment in the conversation. It made a lot of sense. So I got a chuckle out of that.
Well, I brought it up because I figured you could clarify.
Yeah, that's what it's about. It goes on and on. It's I'll spare you because it goes up to 12, I think. So it's a thing. It's a whole other episode.
All right. At any rate, great conversation about synergy today. I love the breadth of what we've covered today, from synergy itself to selfless service, to contrarian, to independent thinkers, to compromising, to teamwork, to trust. Right? We covered the gamut.
Covered all the ground.
But that's the thing that I love about studying words and about the word of the week, is that it's so much more than a word. It's so much more than just a single, you know, set of syllables that come together. You know, it's about what we understand. It's about how we interpret. It's about how our histories and our other vocabulary apply to the words that are here. You know, because without trust, you can't have synergy. Without synergy, you can't have, you know, the 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situation. And so overall, you know, great conversation today. If you are just joining us, I encourage you to, you know, rewind and watch the whole thing when you have some time, because there was actually a lot. I mean, I think that in each 10-minute block, I think we covered about 3 words that stand alone into their own little episodes here.
And if you don't want to rewind and watch here, you can actually go check us out on your favorite podcast app. We're on, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. You just search Word of the Week, Roy Browning, or Word of the Week, Joe Manns. It'll come up. You can catch past episodes. We're about 5 or 6 weeks delayed right now. So right now, if you go to any of the podcast platforms and search for us, you're going to get the first 3 or 4 episodes. We're keeping the rest in the can for the weeks that we take off, because we have families and lives. And when we take off, we want to be able to keep you guys posted on the podcast. So you can go download the podcasts on Spotify, iTunes. I don't know what else is out there, but it's all the podcast stuff.
All the podcast stuff. It's on the Google podcasts. Or if you don't want to wait and you just want to binge them all, then go to YouTube and check out Joe's profile or Roy's profile. Just type in our names, Roy Browning, Joe Manns, and you will find the Word of the Week videos there. And Joe, thanks for the great conversation today. This is a great start to my Thursday.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, man. It gets me excited, and I think we could do this every day and not get tired of it. But we'll keep it once a week. It once a week. All right, man. Hey, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for logging on and commenting and liking and sharing and listening. We appreciate y'all.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone. Have a fantastic Thursday.